Remind yourself how great it feels to read a good book. Get a recommendation from Richard and Judy, exclusive to WHSmith.
Welcome back to the podcast, and we have another real page-turner to recommend to you.
Let's get straight to it and meet Stuart Neville and find out about his book, Those We Left Behind.
The pillow was cool on Kieran's cheek, damp from sweat. Sunlight makes a glowing rectangle on the wall. It lingers flickery green behind his eyelids when he blinks. He does not want to look at the wall on the other side of the room, or what lies in the corner there, beneath the window. He does not want to see that. After all the shouting and the noise and the cracking and the hot and the wet, he doesn't ever want to look at it again. The mattress rocks. Warm air finds the tiny hairs in the back of Kieran's neck and waves them like grass on the dunes, back when they were little and things weren't so hard and angry. A bare arm slips around his waist, the hand taking his, the chest against his back, all warm and cuddly, bony knees tucked behind his. Kieran sees red points of blood on both their wrists. His hands are sticky with it. "Are we going to jail?" he asks. "Probably." Thomas squeezes him tighter, his mouth close to Kieran's ear, the teeth held behind his lips for now. "Will they send us to the same jail, or different ones?" Thomas holds his breath as he thinks. After a while he says, "Dunno."
Well, hello and welcome back to the Rich and Judy Book Club, which we run in partnership with WHSmith. And this is our summer list, and we have a cracking thriller for you, a really cracking thriller. It's by Stuart Neville, and it's called Those We Left Behind. Hello, Stuart.
Hello.
Very, very nice to meet you. This is a novel, although you've written, you're from Belfast, and you've written, all your books have been set in Ireland. But this is a slight departure, isn't it? I mean, you've introduced a detective who you're going to base further stories around?
Yeah, my previous books, the earliest ones, had dealt very much with the legacy of the Troubles and so on. But particularly over the last couple of books, they've gone closer to, I guess, traditional crime novels or thrillers. You know, the setting is very much a part of the story, but the historical background isn't quite so important to them. But they've become more character-driven as well, and that's really been driven by Stuart Flanagan, the protagonist in this book, who first appeared actually in my previous novel as a supporting character. This is her first book as the lead character, but she's kind of opened up a new sort of road for me to go down with, I guess, more personal stories, more emotional stories.
Well, this is very emotional. It's basically the story of two brothers, and the younger one, Kieran, sort of shocked the nation really by confessing to the murder of his foster father when he was, 12?
12 years old.
12 years old. And he was put away. And the book, in prison, obviously, well, in juvenile detention centre. And the book starts when he's 17.
Yeah.
And he served his sentence, and he comes out. And the relationship, the really fascinating relationship, is between him and his older brother, Thomas.
Who was with him at the time of the killing. Is clearly implicated in the killing and does time himself. But it's the younger boy who takes full responsibility for what happened. And everybody accepted that at the time. And as we come to the present day, there are now question marks beginning to pop up. Hang on, was it quite the way it seemed? Who's the protagonist here? Who's telling us that things may not be quite as advertised all those years before?
It's kind of a juggling act between a few characters. The first person whose suspicions are raised, it's actually Paula Cunningham, who's a probation officer, who has the first contact with Kieran.
Because she's preparing him for life in the outside world again. Yeah.
And one of the main strands of research I did for the book was talking to a probation officer about young offenders and all the things that they go through coming out, and all the risks and problems that are wrapped up with that. And she very early on gets a sense that something isn't quite right, and that is confirmed when the son of the natural son of the foster father who was killed comes to her with his belief that it wasn't Kieran that killed his father. In fact, it was his older brother Thomas. And as those questions start being asked, things start to go wrong, and Thomas and Kieran kind of close ranks as it were. And that relationship between Thomas and Kieran is very much based in fact on what tends to happen with siblings who are removed from their normal environment and put somewhere else. They will
Really?
tend to bond
Yes.
very, very tightly. It will tend to become them against the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's very much how Kieran and Thomas view the world. It's
Yes.
them and everybody else.
As it used to be with their foster father, who's a very dark character anyway. I mean, we know
And the
that.
thing is, Kieran's really a lovely character. He really is. Thomas isn't.
No.
And we come to realise very early on that Thomas has this hold over Kieran, who's younger than him. He has this hold over him, which is very, very sinister and very frightening. Is that also something, just slightly at a tangent, is that also something that you found out about siblings who've been removed from their birth home? Does one tend to become more dominant?
That's not so much to do with the siblings, but in cases where children have been involved in violent crime,
Right.
you'll very often find if there's been a group of children, one will be dominant, another one will be more vulnerable. I mean, the obvious case we know of is the Jamie Bulger case,
Yes.
where one of the boys was the dominant one, was the controlling one. One of the boys was vulnerable and weaker. And that is very often the case with child murders, or child murderers, I should say. And that's what feeds into that part of their relationship.
How interesting. What is also interesting, specifically at this moment in time, it's very prescient, really, this book, because of late, as this interview is being recorded in the spring of 2016, there have been a number of headline-hitting stories of child killers, of children killing adults and other children. There seems to be a rash of them at the moment. Some of them we can't talk too much detail about because they're ongoing legally, but what are your reflections on that? Because we somehow feel that childhood is such a time of innocence that it should be impossible for a child to commit a murder, to kill knowingly, with malice aforethought or whatever, kill another human being. What are your reflections on child killers?
It's a very difficult subject, and it was one I did have pause before I tackled, and I actually got one book to research the subject about sort of famous cases of child murderers. And I read about the first 2 pages and had to set it down. It was too disturbing. I couldn't read it.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very dark subject, but it's still. And I should. You've read about, as you know, the book doesn't dwell on the killing itself.
No,
and
no.
that's the one thing I didn't want to do.
No.
What I wanted to dwell on was the relationship and what came after it. And that's the thing that I really find more interesting, is rather than the act itself.
Right, then let me put the question in a much simpler way. Do you believe that as an adult, unless they're certifiably insane or something, or below a certain level of intellectual competence, do you think that a child knows what they're doing when they're actually killing another person? Do you think they're fully aware of what it is that they're actually about to do?
That is a question that will have vexed much more experienced legal minds than mine, I think, over many decades. But the whole question of somebody being able to kill, I mean, I don't think there's a line that somebody crosses in terms of their age.
Right.
But I think every murder, it has to be examined in the context of who those people were, what was their life like at the time. And I mean, it's one thing I learned through research over the years is that I talked to a prison psychologist about this. Actually, he told me that people are either wired to kill or they're not.
Really?
It's an either or thing. It's very hard. It's almost impossible to push somebody into killing.
Yeah.
Unless they are naturally predisposed to be able to do it.
Gosh.
And if you talk, there've been studies about people, young guys being dropped in the front line in Vietnam, will shoot at trees, will shoot at grass, will shoot at anything other than a person, even when their own life is in danger. So that's one of the first things to understand is it's either in you to do it or it's not.
That's fascinating. Well, listen, we must hear more about DCI Flanagan, because as Judy said at the beginning there, it looks like she's going to be a regular in books you're writing. Tell us what you like about her.
As a writer, first of all, what I like about her is she's provided me a way to move away from the tropes of detective fiction, which I've really enjoyed. I was writing a previous series character called Detective Inspector Jack Lennon, and he was very much in that template of the hard-drinking, sort of cynical, bitter singleton cop. So when I came up with Flanagan, she was kind of moving entirely the opposite direction, and that's what I really enjoyed is giving her own set of problems that aren't involving alcoholism or
No.
drug addiction or odd tastes in music, whatever those kind of detective tropes that we were very familiar with. And as a person, I like her. I think that's been a big thing for me.
I can tell.
It's certain. My wife will blush when she hears this. Certain parts of her personality are kind of taken from my wife, in particular, her empathy. That she always wants to see the world from the other person's point of view, and that's probably her key trait. Is she's empathetic to a fault.
Right.
Every case she encounters, she is drawn in on a personal level, an emotional level, probably more than is professionally
Well, I don't
wise.
know what Judy's going to make of that, because the central character in my new novel, a woman, murders her husband. Oh. So there we are. Mentioning your wife, do you show her what you're writing as you write it? Do you ask her for her input?
She normally doesn't read a complete novel until we've got the proof copies, which is like the final stage before publication. But I will very often sound her out on specific ideas. I'll give her a specific scenario, and does this sound feasible? Is this something you'd want to know more about?
Right.
That kind of thing.
And those first proofs, they're like newborn babies, aren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, when you give it to her to read, and you know that she's reading it out in the kitchen or in the bedroom, do you walk around chewing your nails? So opening the door every 10 minutes. What do you think?
Do you know, I used to, but I had to get over it because
See?
yeah.
He does that.
I think in the first couple of times I did, I was kind of doing that sort of dancing from toe to toe,
Exactly.
looking over shoulder kind of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had to stop that. I would drive myself mad and her mad as well. So.
Well, listen, it's a terrific story, and
you.
we can't wait to read more of DCI Flanagan, because like you, I like her. She's great. She's a really beautifully rounded character. This is Stuart Neville. His book, Those We Left Behind. It's obviously available with our partners, WHSmith, and if you get it from them, you get extra content at the back of the book, and only if you buy it from WHSmith. There's an author's Q&A, all sorts of extra material about the writing of the book and what it means and all that, and links to the website and everything you could wish, really, if you wanted to find out more about the writer and about what they've actually written. So enjoy Those We Left Behind.
Hello, my name is Stuart Neville, and I'm the author of Those We Left Behind. All writers have this sort of guilty secret. We all go into bookstores and we quietly walk along the aisle so we find our own books and say, just confirm that there are some there on the shelves. But it's always a thrill, and so you always, when the book first comes out, you'll always go to WHSmith's on your high street and you'll find your book sitting there and have a little quiet smile to yourself, and then slink out again. The things that are best about being a writer are simultaneously the worst things as well. It's given me the opportunity to do a lot of travelling, something I wanted to do when I was younger and for whatever reason didn't get around to, but it's something that I've enjoyed over the last 5-6 years, just getting to see parts of the world I never would have seen otherwise. Also getting to meet readers as well. But something that's been really good for me is meeting writers that I really admire. I've gotten to know people like James Elroy, who have been one of my main influences. And so far, touch wood, I've never had that saying about never meet your heroes. I've never found proof of that. And everybody that I've met has been very gracious and very kind. I mean, I've met people like Stephen King and so on. And everybody's been really nice. And it's been a wonderful thing to be able to get to meet the writers that sort of shaped me as a writer. My favourite place to write is the local library. And particularly if I know what I want to write, if I know I need to get a certain number of words down that day, I like to go to my local library and use the study room. Or it's nice and quiet. And I find I can, if I'm writing at home, I might get 1,500 words done if I'm lucky. If I'm writing in the library, I can do 3,000 to 4,000 in a day. And something psychologically, getting up in the morning, leaving the house and going to work, I think helps a lot. When you start writing a book, there's always that sort of hot flush of excitement, because this is the best thing that anybody's ever thought of ever. This is going to be the best thing I've ever written. It's going to be the best crime novel I've written. This is going to win all the awards and be a huge bestseller. And then you maybe get a third of the way in and realise, actually, no, it's not. And the reality sets in, and it becomes hard work. And that's where the real sort of graft is involved. But actually, my favourite part of the whole process is editing. And I know a lot of writers will tell me I'm mad for this, but I really enjoy having a finished draft of the novel and then going back, and you've got this kind of lumpy sort of piece of clay that you've manufactured, and you set about then refining it and tweaking it and working it until it actually resembles a proper story. I think it's a known quantity at that stage. You know what you've got, more or less, and I enjoy seeing it just get that bit better with every draft that you do. Every time you go back for it, you find things to improve. Sometimes it can be in the structure of the story, sometimes it can be in the flow of sentences, whatever that might be. And that's where I really enjoy working with my editors and my agent, and various people chip in at that stage to kind of create the illusion that I know what I'm doing. There are lots of sort of bits of advice you'll get, like keep writing and that kind of thing, and don't take rejection personally, which most writers will give. My best bit of advice for anybody who's, say, written a novel, my first bit of advice is write another one. I see too often people make the mistake of, if they cross that bridge of actually finishing a novel, they then make the mistake of flogging it to death, trying to get it sold. When really what they should be doing is writing another one and another one and another one, refining the craft. My first book that was published was actually the third novel that I'd written, and the first two just aren't very good. They'll never see the light of day. It takes you to put down a certain number of words to learn how to do it. It's not a thing. There are very few writers who can just sit down at a keyboard and crack out a novel in their first go. It's a skill that's acquired over a lot of trial and error.
Now, this is an extraordinary book. It is a crime thriller, it's a crime story, but it's very different because it involves young people, a boy actually, Kieran, who confessed to murdering his foster father when he was only 12 years old. It's a huge, shocking case, child killer, etc., etc. He was put away, and the story begins 5 years later when he's 17 and he's just been released and he's trying to make his way in the world again. Kieran is actually a lovely character. He's a boy you really can't help liking, but Kieran has an older brother called Thomas, who is very controlling and very hard. And Kieran's probation officer and the detective who followed his case become more and more convinced that Kieran was not the murderer. Kieran did not commit this murder. They suspect it was actually his older brother that did it.
And I have to say that I think that the author, Stuart Neville, when we interviewed him about this book for this podcast, was really interesting about the nature of child killers. By that I don't mean those who kill children, but children who kill others, whether they're other children or adults. And we do seem to be living through a period in this year of our Lord 2016 where there are an awful number of these stories being reported. I mean, people being murdered by children, allegedly. What's going on? And he was very interesting about that, wasn't he? When he spoke about killers actually being almost natural born. That to commit murder, homicide, even to kill someone in a war situation, you, as he put it, you have to have it in you.
Yeah, you either can or you can't.
Exactly, and so that goes straight back to this story. Which of the two brothers really has it in them? Does the boy who confessed to the killing really have it in him to kill someone else? Or is it the older brother who got off on a much, much lighter charge?
And although it is primarily a cracking crime thriller, it's also a very tender book, full of emotion and pain, and you can't help but feel desperately sorry for Kieran as this boy who has no birth family apart from this horrible older brother he's got, and who has been put into care at such a very young age.
Well, next time we welcome back an old friend to the book club who's been collecting more awards and plaudits since we reviewed his book Restless in 2007.
I write films and I write drama for television. I also write plays now, and I write a lot of journalism. So I've got many irons in the fire, and I think each one requires a different mindset. They're quite different forms of writing from writing a novel. The novel is a world of absolute liberation.
That's William Boyd, coming to a Richard and Judy Book Club podcast near you.
Looking for something to read? Don't know which page to turn to? Richard and Judy can help. Check out their book club, exclusive to WHSmith.